Imagine your morning routine tomorrow, but with one massive, glaring difference. You wake up, you stretch, you walk over to your closet, and instead of staring at a rack of shirts, wondering which one says I'm professional but also approachable, you just don't, because the closet doesn't exist. You walk out your front door completely, unapologetically naked. You step onto the bus, naked. You sit down at your office desk, naked. Your boss is naked. The barista who made your coffee is naked. Everyone is just there, exposed to the elements, the fluorescent lights, and each other with absolutely nothing but their birthday suits. It sounds like a classic anxiety dream, the kind that wakes you up in a cold sweat at 3 a.m. But what if this wasn't a nightmare? What if this was just reality? What if, at no point in our 300,000-year history as modern humans, did anyone look at a piece of dried animal skin and think, you know what, I should wrap this around my waist? We take clothing so completely for granted that we forget it is, quite literally, an artificial second skin we engineered to survive. We are the only species on Earth that requires a manufacturing industry just to step outside without getting arrested or freezing to death. But what if we never crossed that line? What if we remained the naked ape permanently? To understand what that world would look like, we have to look at how different our geography, our biology, our societies, and even our daily technologies would be. And spoiler alert, it's not just about being cold. It completely rewrites what it means to be human. Let's start with the most obvious and immediate consequence of a clothes-free world, the map of human civilization.
If humans never invented clothes, the world today would look incredibly empty. Right now, humans live on every single continent, including Antarctica. We have cities in Siberia where the temperature regularly drops to -50 degrees. We have high-altitude settlements in the Andes. We manage this not because our bodies are built for the cold, but because we are masters of creating microclimates. A winter coat is just a portable, wearable heater. Without clothes, our geographical range would instantly shrink to a very narrow, warm band around the equator. Think about it. We are tropical primates. Our bodies are optimized for the African savanna. We have very little body fat compared to marine mammals. We have no fur, and we rely on sweating to cool down. If you put a naked human in a European winter, they will develop hypothermia and die in a matter of hours. So in a world without clothing, the great human migrations out of Africa would have hit a hard, icy, immovable wall. There would be no ancient Rome, no Vikings, no crossing the Bering Land Bridge into the Americas. Human history would have played out entirely in the tropics and subtropics. The global population would be a fraction of what it is today, crowded into places like Central Africa, South Asia, and Northern South America. The entire northern and southern hemispheres would be vast, untouched wildernesses, left entirely to the woolly mammoths, bears, and wolves who actually had the decency to grow their own coats. We would be a localized species, forever bound to the warmth of the equator, looking north toward the cold mountains the way we look at deep space today, as a beautiful, hostile void we can never visit.
But let's play devil's advocate for a second. Evolution is incredibly stubborn. If we didn't invent clothes to protect us from the cold, would our bodies have found another way? If humans had slowly pushed into colder climates without clothes, natural selection would have had to work overtime to keep us alive, and the results would probably make us look very different in the mirror. First, we would likely have re-evolved our fur. Losing our fur in Africa was a massive evolutionary win because it allowed us to sweat and run long distances without overheating. But as soon as we moved north, that lack of fur became a death sentence. In a world without tailoring, the humans who survived in slightly colder regions would be the ones who grew thicker, denser body hair. Over thousands of generations, we would have transitioned back from smooth, naked apes to highly insulated, fuzzy hominids. We'd probably look more like our cousins, the chimpanzees or gorillas, with thick coats of hair covering our shoulders, backs, and limbs to trap body heat. Or, alternatively, we might have gone the marine mammal route. To survive cold, damp climates without fur, we would have needed a serious layer of subcutaneous fat. We would have evolved to be much rounder, stockier, and heavily insulated with blubber, similar to seals or sea lions. Our blood circulation systems would have adapted to restrict blood flow to our extremities in the cold, keeping our core warm while our hands and feet went numb but survived.
So, if we did manage to inhabit the globe without clothes, we wouldn't look like the humans we see today. The ideal human body wouldn't be lean and smooth. It would be thick, heavily padded, and covered in a dense layer of natural fur. Now let's talk about the psychological and social side of things. If clothes don't exist, what happens to our concepts of modesty, shame, and attraction? Right now, we live in a society deeply obsessed with hiding and revealing. We have strict social rules about what parts of the body can be shown in public, and those rules vary wildly from culture to culture. But the common thread is that some level of covering is almost always required. If we never wore clothes, the concept of public nudity wouldn't exist. You can't feel naked if naked is the only state of being that has ever existed. In this alternate reality, our relationship with our bodies would be completely revolutionized. Body shame, as we know it, would likely evaporate. We wouldn't have the luxury of hiding our perceived physical flaws behind Spanx, high-waisted jeans, or dark, flattering colors. Every scar, every stretch mark, every curve, and every sign of aging would be constantly on display to everyone we meet, from our coworkers to strangers on the street. This sounds terrifying to a modern, clothed mind, but the reality is we would simply get used to it. When everything is visible, nothing is shocking.
Interestingly, this would also completely change how sexual attraction works. In a clothed society, we rely heavily on visual teases, the curve of a shoulder, the flash in an ankle, the fit of a dress. Without clothes, human courtship would rely much more on other sensory cues. Pheromones, scent, voice tone, posture, and the health of our natural hair would become the primary drivers of attraction. We wouldn't be able to catfish anyone with a great wardrobe or a padded suit. What you see is quite literally what you get. But wait, humans are still humans. We are, at our core, deeply status-obsessed social creatures. We love hierarchy and we love showing off. In our world, we use fashion to do this. We wear designer brands, tailored suits, and expensive sneakers to signal to the world that we have money, power, and taste. If you take away the clothes, how does a king show he's the king? How does a wealthy person show they are wealthy? The answer is that we would turn our actual bodies into the canvas. Instead of buying expensive clothes, we would invest heavily in permanent body modification. Tattoos wouldn't just be a personal artistic choice, they would be highly complex, incredibly expensive status symbols. The wealthy would cover their bodies in intricate, colorful pigments that took hundreds of hours of painful labor to apply. We would also rely heavily on jewelry, but with a twist. Without clothes to attach pins or brooches to, jewelry would have to be pierced directly into the skin, draped over the ears, or hung around the neck, wrists, and ankles. Heavy gold chains, nose rings, ear gauges, and elaborate headpieces would be the ultimate signs of power. Body paint and temporary pigments like ochre and clay would be used daily to signal our mood, our social status, or our tribal affiliation. You'd paint yourself differently for a business meeting, a funeral, or a date. And hair? Hairstyling would be a massive, multi-billion-dollar industry. Since your head hair and potentially your body hair is the only natural fiber you have control over, styling, braiding, dyeing, and sculpting hair would become the primary way we express our individuality. Your hairstyle wouldn't just be about looking neat, it would be your entire identity. So, we've talked about biology and society. But what about the sheer, exhausting practicality of living in a modern world with no clothes? Let's start with the most devastating loss of all, pockets. Have you ever tried to go about your day without pockets? It is a logistical nightmare. Where do you put your phone, your keys, your wallet, your lip balm? In a clothes-free world, the bag industry would be the most important sector of the economy. But wearing a bag on bare skin is incredibly uncomfortable. Backpack straps would chafe against bare shoulders. Messenger bags would rub against bare hips. We would have to invent incredibly soft, ergonomically padded carrying harnesses that strapped directly to our bodies, designed specifically not to cause friction burns on our naked skin. And then there's the furniture. Have you ever sat on a leather couch on a hot summer day while wearing shorts?
You know that awful, peeling, sticky sound when you try to stand up? Now imagine that, but for your entire body, every single day, everywhere you go. Office chairs, public transit seats, and restaurant booths would have to be completely redesigned. No more vinyl, no more leather, no more cheap plastic. Everything would have to be made of breathable, antimicrobial, easily washable materials like wicker, mesh, or treated wood. And the cleaning protocols for public seating would have to be incredibly intense. Public health departments would have to enforce strict hygiene laws for transit seats to prevent the spread of skin infections. And speaking of safety, how do we handle dangerous jobs? How do you fry bacon without an apron protecting you from popping grease? How do you weld without protective leathers? How do you work in a chemical plant, clean up hazardous waste, or fight fires? The short answer is, we probably couldn't. Without the technology of protective clothing, our industrial progress would have ground to a halt. We wouldn't have heavy manufacturing, space travel, good luck getting to the moon in your birthday suit, or high-temperature metallurgy. We would be stuck in a much simpler, low-tech agrarian or hunter-gatherer existence, simply because the physical world is too sharp, too hot, and too dangerous for unprotected human skin. When you look at all these pieces together, a wild truth starts to emerge.
Clothing isn't just something we wear. It is the very foundation of human civilization. It is the technological shield that allowed a weak, hairless tropical primate to leave its home, conquer the frozen corners of the planet, build massive industries, and explore the stars. Without clothes, we wouldn't just be colder, we would be a completely different species. We would be hairier or heavier, confined to the equator, living in simpler societies, displaying our status through scars and tattoos, and constantly worrying about where to put our keys. So tomorrow morning, when you're standing in front of your closet, complaining for the 100th time that you have absolutely nothing to wear, take a second to appreciate the sheer, miraculous genius of that simple t-shirt. It's not just fashion, it's the only reason you're here. What about you? If you could live in a completely clothing-free world, would you? Or are you too attached to your pockets? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time, stay warm and see you soon.